We can talk about the relocation program now. Okay, so I wanted to, well, first off, before we get into it, just wanted to show you the two photos here that I thought were interesting. This is a photo from, of course, that famous Oval Office meeting. As you can see that both J.D. Vance and President Donald Trump are giving the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, and Paddington Bear, voice actor, he giving him the hand, essentially, as they go back and forth and say, why aren't you saying thank you? And had the whole kerfluffle. And then look at the difference between Zelensky's recent meeting with the president of Finland. There's a million types of stories to be told, but there is a story to also just be told in a simple image. And when we say who's being the best ally to Ukraine, who's being most supportive to Ukraine right now, who's doing what's most in Ukraine's interest, and who looks like the best ally, the United States is not pulling off that image. They're not pulling it off in practicality's sake either, but they're also not pulling off that image. Okay, so we need to talk about an update to a story that we covered, actually, I think about a year and a half ago now. I don't know how long it's been, but it's, I think, been well over a year. Now, over a year and a half ago, Putin laid the foundation for a program that to me is very scary because it could mean the large displacement of peoples in occupied territory who do not identify as Russian or choose to go along with the Russian occupation by registering themselves as Russian and being part of the government and, moving with the Russians and becoming part of the occupation, part of this new society Russia is trying to build in occupied territory. And the way they built that foundation, and I tried to give it some attention at the time, was that the Constitution, the law was changed so that those in occupied territory, if they do not take Russian citizenship, could have their property taken from them. So that means their homes, that means their houses, that could mean their cars and belongings, as well as a bunch of new controls for the people in occupied territory that allowed the Russians to increase the pressure as they arrested those who have ties to Ukrainian civil society, those who have ties to, any, Ukrainian culture or the Ukrainian language. I mean, people have been arrested for very little, even it could be as little as just speaking the Ukrainian language at times. That people have been arrested and abused for that. We've gotten testimony of that. And they continue to up the pressure on those who are not active participants of the new regime. And now, after about a year, with the new government in place in Washington, Putin has ordered that Ukrainians without legal status have to leave Russia, including occupied territories, by September 10th. We have a day. We have a date. The ones that do not accept Russian citizenship in occupied territories, those who will not actively say, I agree with the conquering of my home, my village, my town, my city. I will make myself part of the entity that could have killed my mother, my son, my brother, my sister, my neighbors, or my friends. The entity that could have destroyed my community if you're somebody who lives in Bakhmut or Avdiivka or Popasna or anywhere. Anywhere. I mean, there's been so many of these places that have been burnt to the ground, razed to the ground in such a way. I believe Popasna is actually never going to be rebuilt, as announced by the Russian occupied authority. But now that foundation is being capitalized upon, and Putin is announcing the deportation of those who will not become Russians from occupied Ukraine. The further Russification program of the Ukrainian territories to what they would think would be completion, removing those who do not sign up to stay. So this would be their last stage in the Russification. Look, they've taken villages, they've renamed them from Ukrainian to Russian names. They've changed the curriculum from Ukrainian into Russian. They've gone in and they've destroyed Ukrainian monuments to the Holodomor and to other atrocities against the Ukrainian people, trying to erase that history. They've challenged the civil society. They've put in politicians, some of which despise Ukrainians. One of the senators that they've put in occupied Zaporizhia is a fascist who actively describes the Ukrainians as animals. Somebody who looks down upon the people he supposedly is supposed to govern and represent. The people that are supposed to represent them and advocate for them in the Russian system hate them. And now the further Russification program is moving on to the removal of any of those who will not make themselves part of the system and pay taxes into and contribute to the system that is bombing their cousins and brothers just miles away. And I mean, if you want to read the declaration, here it is in the original text for anybody who would be interested. Here it is in the English text, a decreed president from the Russian Federation. In order to protect the rights and freedoms of the men and citizen guided by Article 80 of the Constitution of the Russian Federation, Article 3 of the federal law, on this legal status of foreign citizens of the Russian Federation, I decree that A, citizens of Ukraine located in the Russian Federation who do not have legal grounds for staying residing in the Russian Federation are obliged to independently leave Russia by September 10th, 2025, inclusive, regulating their legal status in the Russian Federation in accordance with the decree. So become a Russian citizen or leave or be deported or possibly detained. Look, part of the negotiations that are going on between the Ukrainian government and American government and the American government and the Russian government, but as far as I know, according to Zelensky mentioned, we've only heard Zelensky mention these talks with the American government, is civilians that are still detained by the Russians. So there is a possibility that the Russians will take these civilians and just hold them for leverage. That is not an impossibility. Regulate the legal status. On temporary measures for regulating legal status, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. B, foreign citizens and stateless persons who arrive before the day of entry into the force of this decree on the territory of the Donetsk People's Republic, Luhansk People's Republic, Zaporizhia region, and Kherson region for the purpose not related to performance of labor activities for a period exceeding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a bunch of legalese, but you can read between the fine print and you can understand the implication. On September 10th, the Russians will have the laws in place to start the deportation program of the Ukrainians who refuse to become part of their nation's destruction. But hey, ceasefire and de-escalation. Ceasefire would be good if we could start reversing this type of stuff. If we heard some attention to this type of stuff from the White House, but we've heard nothing. Okay, so I wanted to check out 2 Steve Rosenberg segments. These are really good from Steve Rosenberg. So let's see what Russian state press is saying about Trump-Putin's phone call.
In Moscow, some things are changing. Winter here, slowly giving way to spring. But no change in the political weather. No compromise in the air. Listen to the language President Putin used today. The Russian army, he said, was completely routing Ukrainian forces in Russia's Kursk region. No mention of Tuesday's telephone call with Donald Trump. But the Russian papers were full of it. Vladimir Putin believes that Russia is winning the war against Ukraine and is in no rush to declare a comprehensive ceasefire. Moscow seeks maximum pressure on Kyiv.
We could talk about a complete Russian victory if Ukraine becomes a real buffer zone, demilitarized buffer zone with very limited armed forces, with very limited practical cooperation with NATO, without joint military exercises, without military supplies from NATO.
If it's Ukraine's surrender Moscow wants.
Do you not change your shirt every day? Oh, this is a sweater. This isn't a shirt. This is a sweater. But I like the sweater quite a lot. I like it. A date gave it to me.
Would Donald Trump stand in its way?
The Kremlin today said that Presidents Putin and Trump trust each other and understand each other very well. The other thing that Donald Trump understands, because the Kremlin has dropped plenty of hints, is that there are lots of lucrative deals to be done in Russia. It's why Ukrainians fear that President Trump will prioritize that over helping Kyiv get a fair deal to end the war.
The Kremlin praises Donald Trump, but on the streets of Moscow, they're skeptical.
Как-то он очень быстро меняет.
He changes his mind a lot, says Tatiana. 1 minute Trump gives, the next he takes away.
This is the thing. This is the one problem for the Russians. At the end of the day, Trump's a flip-flopper at heart. He's an opportunist if there's ever been one. And so if there is somehow he thinks he can help himself more by just like all of a sudden, yay, Ukraine, I think he'll do it. I just don't think there's people around him that can make that argument right now, or anybody in his inner circle who believes that. Maybe outside of Marco Rubio, maybe, but like from what I'm reading, he's getting kind of boxed out of a lot of major decisions, and he's learning about it in the news. Was the date was he cute? What, the date? Yeah, I think so. They're very nice.
Vladimir is still waiting for proof that Trump will mend relations with Russia. We've been promised things before, he says. Donald Trump has promised huge change in America and abroad. Russia hopes it will benefit. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Okay, next one.
2 days have passed since the Vladimir Putin-Donald Trump telephone call, and judging by today's Russian papers, Moscow is upbeat about relations with the Trump administration. Moskovsky Komsomolets believes that events continue to develop in the right direction, the direction right and beneficial for Russia. This opinion piece in Nezavisima Gazeta explains why. For now, Trump's policies are beneficial for Russia. They are starkly different from those of his predecessor, Joe Biden. Trump is ready to make significant concessions to Russia without demanding anything in return. Russia hasn't moved an inch from its original...
They know it! Dude, they know it! It's so clear! Oh, it's so painful! The Russian state president's like, dude, we can get anything out of this dude! We can get anything we want! What do you guys... Oh my god! And we don't have to give anything? Oh, this is fantastic. Oh, this is great for Russia. Just right open, out and about in the state press. Oh my god. So it's not just the American people that believe it. It's not just the Ukrainians that believe it. Even the Russians believe it. And they openly believe it.
Position on the Ukraine crisis. The writer encourages Russian officials to dial down their traditional anti-American feelings and realize that Trump is good news for Russia. Trump has stopped financing USAID, the globalists' main weapon for destabilizing the internal situation in Russia and neighboring states. In Russia, lots of people have responded by suggesting that this is just a trick, that soon a new anti-Russia structure will be set up. What grounds are there to assume this? None at all, apart from the anti-Americanism in people's heads. The Russian government paper Rossiyskaya Gazeta leads with this: what's good for the ruble is good for the dollar. The US is thinking of cancelling anti-Russian sanctions. Experts interviewed by the paper suggest that those sanctions likely to be removed first are those on the Moscow exchange and Russian banks that have prevented them from making free use of the dollar. What's more, after the telephone conversation of Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, the White House promised Russia enormous economic deals if there will be peace in Ukraine. Even the Russian military paper, Krasnaya Zvezda, Red Star, has a positive message today about the United States. Russia and the US on course to normalize relations. Finally, Izvestia, Russia-US trade could double in 2025. Russia could resume deliveries of fuel and metals to America, while the US could supply Russia with technical equipment and components.
Now, to be clear, if that's true, if what he's saying right there is true, what we would be doing is giving Russia the materials to build weapons to bomb Ukraine. I just want to be clear, that's what would happen. Because right now, if there's no ceasefire in sight, and we don't have any security agreement that's going to stop another invasion, those technical components, those components that they're lacking them because they need them for weapons, because they use them all for weapons. So if we send them to them, or we sell them to them, what are they going to use them for? What are they going to use CNC machines for? Why do they want American CNC machines? For the components necessary for production of mass scale of weapons, so they could increase the amount of drone production, the amount of artillery production, and the amount of armored vehicle production. And let me tell you, out of all the things Trump can do, this would be the most damaging. Okay, so